Welcome back to Rose Connections. I am just going to just call it out. I did not post anything really substantive in November, and that is entirely because of the election. I just preemptively gave myself permission to not meet some of these deadlines that I wanted to for this channel. And I figure most of you will forgive me and understand. I have worked in politics since I was about 14 years old on some level or another, whether it's volunteering and licking envelopes and knocking on doors or providing, policy analysis to campaigns or helping nonprofit groups understand, the pros and cons of certain issues. I have worked in and around campaigns, election politics for a very long time. I have not seen anything like what we just saw with this year's election. And, fortunately, it sounds like, everything is now starting to resolve itself. I'm not going to, I am holding my breath until frankly January, because, even though I think many of us are agreed as to what the outcome of this election was, there is a lot of things that can happen along the way. And so this, more than anything, I wanted to actually take this opportunity to talk today about a component of leadership that I think is actually pretty relevant in this current era that we're in for December, for January, as we're looking forward into the next year, especially as we are looking toward solutions for COVID. And so that's something I really want to talk about today is what do I mean when I use the hashtag radical reflections? That's a shorthand that I have for knowing yourself. And it's a shorthand that I have for climb your own mountain. I'm just going to point back there for you. So climbing your own mountain and understanding yourself and understanding where you end and where someone else begins, the resources that are available to you, what those are, is such a critical part of leadership, in my opinion. And, I talk a lot in analogy. And so I really do want you to kind of focus on that tapestry right there. And, ooh, that gives me ideas. Maybe I should get tapestries for all the different things that I'm talking about, and all those different hashtags that I use. But this tapestry, and this is not Colorado. I'm a Colorado girl, born and raised in Colorado. This is not Colorado. This is actually in Canada, and it's on my list of places that I want to go. So when I say radical reflections, it is about, being radical, opening yourself up to understanding who you really are and understanding what is your light that you can share. What is that level of expertise that you can share? And I'm going to tell you right now that I personally believe that all of us, no matter where we live, no matter what we do for a living, no matter how we grew up, no matter how we identify, all of us are being called to embrace our own leadership potential and to become leaders in the various levels that we live and work in throughout our lives. And that could, we all should be leaders of our own life. We should not be necessarily following what someone else has dictated we should want or need for our lives. Too many of us are, but I'm here to tell you, you don't have to. And that we are being challenged as a people to step up into those leadership roles, whether we want to or not. And leadership is going to look different no matter what it is. And I'll do another thing just on leadership alone. But today I really wanted to focus on those radical reflections. What do I mean by that? And that means understanding yourself. I've said that a few times just in the last 4 minutes, right? Because it's having that courage to look at yourself, to look at that reflection of yourself. I don't know about you, but every time I walk past a mirror, I have both a mix of pride and a mix of shame. There's certain areas of my body that I'm constantly going to get drawn to and I'm going to feel shame and guilt about. And other areas I might feel anger about. And then there's going to be some times I'm like, ooh, my hair is really on point today. Ooh, look at that eyeliner. My eyeliner is not the best it can be today. Or, oh, I really like how that color brings out my eyes or something like that. We see both a mix of good and bad. And so those radical reflections is thoughtfully engaging in that inquiry, in that radical inquiry about who we really are and what is special and important about us. Why us? Because one of the things that we are challenged as, and I think one of the hardest things for all of us to do, any of us to do, especially me, is when you become a leader, you are being asked also to depersonalize what you're doing so that you can do what is best for a larger group of people. So that you can make sure that the decisions that you're making align with your ethics, for example. Because sometimes the things that you want to do here are not always going to be the things that align with your ethics. And we'll have another conversation about that, especially as related to law, because it's a big reason why I left the practice of law. But understanding what this is and what stories you are, trudging through your forest with, what trees are on fire and what sustains you and what could be poisonous to you. Knowing your own inner landscape and being a master of your own inner landscape. It always amazes me that, growing up, I'm a Colorado girl, so I used to go to the mountains all the time as a kid. And how my dad just knows so intimately all of the area around our cabin. And it's not just our property he knows. He knows, where there's a natural spring. He knows where you can find such and such resource. He knows what resources are available to him, to us, when we are in the mountains. He knows how to safely climb those rocks and how to safely get me back home. And he knows where he is weak and where he is strong. And it's so interesting that I even bring up my dad today because I talked to him earlier today. He actually broke his hip last week. And so he's in rehab, he's in recovery. He probably would hate me even mentioning this. But my dad was actually very influential in me really even knowing how to do this as a kid. He's a psychologist. So he would engage me in this really radical, honest inquiry about what's going on for me. How am I feeling? We talked about my feelings a lot as a kid. And that really set the stage for me to understand this as an adult and especially as a leader. And one of the things that happens when you start climbing your own mountain, when you start really understanding who you are and what's available to you and what your strengths and your weaknesses are, then you know when to ask for help. Hopefully that you learn that. You learn how and when to ask for help. You know where someone else's expertise is going to be even better and is going to augment and enhance your decision making. Because what happens when you get to the top of that mountain, which is a continual process, you're going up and down that thing over and over and over because you are forging a path for other folks. But when you get to the top of that mountain, you see this vast array of life in front of you. I remember the very first time I ever went to Pikes Peak, and I've been there a couple times, like most Colorado girls have. I was so astounded. I could see Pueblo, my hometown, from there. I could see Denver. I could see how flat everything was. And, Purple Mountain's Majesty was written about Pikes Peak. And amber waves of grain is seriously what you see when you're standing on top of Pikes Peak. You see these rolling hills and you start to understand that landscape. And I valued that so much as a kid, because when I was driving back from Chicago after graduating, my undergrad, and we started seeing these rolling hills in Kansas, I could feel me getting closer to home. I could feel me getting closer to the Pikes Peak. I could feel me, I could feel that draw, because I could see so far away when I was a kid that I understood, oh my God, I might be looking into a different state. Maybe not, but I thought I was. And that helped me feel closer to home when we started inching our way mile by mile by mile closer to home. Because I had that gravity of understanding that Pikes Peak is but one little peak compared to the vast glittering array of everything in front of me. It is just a piece of the puzzle, just a small little fragment, and I am just a small little fragment. And I'm not saying that to diminish us and to diminish what we can offer to the world. I am saying that so that you understand who you are in relationship to that world. It's interesting because the last job that I had, I was a senior manager for a nonprofit organization. I was doing human services work. And when I got into the position, I had been a Social Security disability attorney for a while now. And so I knew Social Security disability really well. I was considered kind of a local expert on the subject, and especially on those initial applications. And so getting into this position, though, I needed to start learning housing and start learning, the ins and outs of housing, which I still don't know. Don't ask me about housing. I am not your housing person, but I know lots of people who are. But it's interesting because as they were kind of explaining concepts, I still am in this Social Security mindset, this small, very nuanced mindset. There's not many people who know that much about it. And so they would say something and I would think, oh yeah, that's like this Social Security thing. And they were kind of patient with me after a while, but at one point they said, okay, we need you to take a step back from that though. Yes, you know Social Security, and yes, I know that you are using this to help yourself learn this, because if you can make those parallels, it makes it easier. But in the end, you're going to have that 30,000 foot view, that 14,000 foot view, that 10,000 foot view, whatever. You're going to have to be above it all in order to see how little some of these things matter, so that you know what is the priority, so that you know where you need help, so that you know how this Social Security thing fits in with this housing thing, and fits in with this income thing, and fits in with this taxing thing, or healthcare, or whatever. And that's just that one world. So the way I imagine it is I'm standing at the top of that mountain and I can see everything in front of me. And so the petty disagreements that are happening between my employees, does it really matter in the end? Maybe not. That petty disagreement that you're having with your neighbor over a barking dog, what is the core issue there? That was relevant for me when I was a mediator. And so becoming a leader means understanding what are the tools available to you, what are the resources available to you, and what of those things really matter. What is actually you that is natural to your landscape, organic to who you are and your experience and your lived experience? And what are the things that are just trash that someone else left behind? Because in the end, leadership is about you. It is about the perspective that you bring into it. Because when you stand at Pikes Peak, you're going to notice things that I didn't notice, because you are a different person than me. It matters that both of us have conquered that, have journeyed to get there. because each of us have collected something along the way. Each of us have learned something along the way. Some of us had to backtrack and get lost for a little bit, because that's exactly what happened in that job that I was in. Is one of the things I did not recognize, and I did not take the time to radically reflect upon, was how much trauma was driving me. How much all of that forest, that I just traversed is now on fire. I could only see what was right in front of my face. And I could not depersonalize it enough to be able to step back and see, oh my God, I am setting this entire mountain on fire because I'm in danger. I'm the one on fire. And so everything that I pass is just lighting up in not a healthy way. And that's not to say that I was destructive. It meant that I didn't even know myself and how I was impacting the environment around me, how I was impacting myself, including my own belief systems. Because eventually, one way or another, we have to be able to, if we are going to lead, and especially if we're going to create a world that is more loving and more sustainable and more just and more understanding, we have to be willing to see ourselves. And we have to be willing to see ourselves as we are, both the good and the bad. The good hair day and the, ooh, I don't like the way my stomach looks and that, but you know what? Maybe that's just someone else's programming that I'm playing out. So it's understanding also what went into becoming who you are. One of the next videos I'm going to do is about the tower. Over the summer, on the anniversary of my calling, I actually gave a talk, and it was, I think, a pretty fantastic talk, personally. But I'm going to do an abridged version of it, and I'm going to do several different parts of it where I talk about the tower. And the tower, this is the same concept of rising above it all, having this space that is yours, and understanding what is there and making it actually reflect who you are. The other components of leadership that I do talk about is relationship reboot, where, there we go. I am just setting that to voicemail. Relationship reboot, where we then apply those same understandings that we have gained about ourselves to our relationships with others. Likewise, where we then go on to this radiant resilience. And this is more like a harmonization between these three factors, right? So it's not just stages, and it's not just like you achieve this, so now you get to move on to this. All of these things are happening at the same time. These are all different streams that need to be in tune in order to be a good leader. So radiant resilience is about leading from that place of vulnerability, because you have been humbled in your relationships with other people. You understand maybe how, you were the one on fire and setting everything else ablaze. And you understand how other people impact you. And so then you're able to kind of marry those things together, blend and merge those things together to really create solutions that are going to be heart-centered, recognizing that human vulnerability, but are also going to be strong, ethical, this is the right thing to do decisions. And whether we're making those decisions in our families, whether we're being called to lead our families through a very difficult time, or we are being called to run for election and to be designated a leader by vote. Either way, no matter where you land on that spectrum right now, in the world that we are living in right now, with coronavirus taking away all of our distractions and excuses, we get to see who we really are. And so Radical Reflections is a reflection of that. It is a reflection of who we are and what we bring to the table that is amazing and gorgeous and needed. So I'm here to tell you that yes, you are needed. Yes, you are being called to be a leader. And so if you're interested in learning more about that, yes, I do leadership coaching on top of everything else. And I also teach about trauma-informed care in these same leadership concepts. And I've actually been doing leadership training since high school, since I worked with National Hispanic Institute many, many years ago. And so if that is of interest to you, head over to rose-connections.com or shoot me an email at the address that I give below. Or you can also find me on Facebook at Temple of the Rose Gold Heart. It's a private Facebook group. If you are looking for some spiritual support, inspirational sayings and different ways to view things, different perspectives, that is a great place to land. It's really small right now, and it is a private group so that, we create sort of this safer space for folks. And I also have a Patreon page where I do some more writing on these subjects, and where I also share messages of divine love to really challenge those ideas within ourselves that we're not worthy, so that we understand how we can live love through the works that we do, in the interactions that we have, and the work that we are called to do. So you can head over to that Patreon page. All of the links are down below. Please click subscribe, and so that you get notifications of more of these videos that I do. And please forgive me for November. Hopefully December will be a little bit more of an abundant month in terms of these videos. Thank you so much, and I so very look forward to our next time together.